Okay, I want you to picture something for a second. You're driving, it's late, pitch black, maybe a little fog on the glass, and suddenly your passenger just grabs the dashboard and screams, "What's that ahead in the road?"
And your heart stops.
You slam on the brakes, you're swerving, heart pounding, you look, and it's, just a deer or a pothole.
Hmm.
But then you realize they didn't say ahead in the road. They asked, "Was that ahead in the road?"
Which is, yeah, infinitely worse. I mean, a pothole is an inconvenience. A severed head is a crime scene.
It's a totally different evening.
Hmm.
But if you look at those two sentences on paper, they are identical. A-H-E-A-D versus A space H-E-A-D. The sounds your mouth makes are basically the same.
But one's a traffic update and the other is a horror movie. And the only thing standing between you and that horror movie is what we're talking about today. It's the music of speech. The rhythm, the pauses, the stress.
Today we're diving into prosody.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I hear prosody, I immediately think of, 10th grade poetry class. Iambic pentameter,
Right. People in ruffles.
Exactly. But the research we have today, this is a chapter by Shari Spear and Alison Blodgett, it says this isn't about poetry, it's about survival.
It's really about how the brain constructs reality. Because we think we listen to words, but we don't. We listen to the structure around the words.
So help me out here. When psycholinguists talk about prosody, is that just a fancy word for intonation, like sounding sarcastic versus sincere?
That's part of it for sure, but it's much bigger. It's more architectural. Technically, prosody is three things: duration, pitch, and amplitude.
How long, how high, how loud?
Exactly. But really, you should think of it as the scaffolding of language. Written text has punctuation, right? It has bold font paragraph breaks. Speech has none of that. Prosody is the auditory punctuation that stops a stream of sound from just being noise.
What's funny to me, though, is that for a long time, scientists seem to hate this stuff. I was reading that back in the 60s, researchers called prosody a nuisance variable.
A nuisance variable. Such a dismissive term, isn't it?
It's incredibly rude.
But you have to get the context. This was the 60s. The big thing was syntax, grammar, Chomsky and all that. They wanted to find the pure sort of mathematical rules of language.
And the music kept getting in the way.
It kept messing up the data, so they tried to control for it. They'd actually ask people to read sentences in a monotone voice.
Which is just bizarre. Nobody talks like that unless they're a poorly programmed robot.
Exactly. They thought monotone meant neutral. But Spear and Blodgett make a great point here. Monotone isn't neutral. It's just a weird, highly specific type of prosody. You can't remove the music from speech any more than you can remove the font from a word. It has to sound like something.
So they're basically studying this lab-grown version of language that doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
But then you get these studies that force them to pay attention. The click migration stuff. This is where I actually put the paper down and just stared at the wall for a minute.
It's a classic for a reason. Fodor and Bever, 1965.
Can you walk us through this setup? I want to make sure I'm not overstating how wild this is.
Okay, so picture it. 1965. Heavy headphones, reel-to-reel tape. They have people listen to a sentence. And while the sentence is playing, the researchers splice in this loud burst of noise, a click, at a very specific millisecond.
So I'm listening, and then C-L-I-C-K, there's this burst of static. And my job is just to say where I heard it.
Right. And to really test the brain, they'd place the click right in the middle of a word, a place it just doesn't belong. But when they asked people, where was the click?
They got it wrong.
They got it wrong. Consistently.
Oh, hold on. Are we sure they didn't just forget? I mean, memory is slippery.
That's what you'd think, but the errors weren't random. They didn't just guess. They consistently reported hearing the click at the grammatical boundary, at the pause between clauses. Their brains literally picked up the sound of that click and moved it over to where the comma would be.
That's the part that gets me. The brain is editing the audio file in real time. It's saying, nope, that noise doesn't belong inside the word constitution. I'm just going to scoot it over here to the pause where it makes sense.
Yeah, that's click migration. It was this huge piece of proof that we don't just passively record sound like a microphone. We actively reorganize what we hear to fit a structure. We care more about the structure than the raw acoustic reality.
So this music is the primary filter. We hear the rhythm first, and we just hang the words on it.
And there's biological evidence for that. The source mentions that infants, and we are talking 3 days old, already show a preference for the prosody of their native language.
3 days. They can't even see straight yet.
Nope. But they've been listening in the womb. They don't know any words, but they know the beat. You know, writing is a pretty new technology. Spoken language is the biological base. So it makes sense that prosody is the operating system.
Okay, so we've got this operating system. but sometimes the software glitches.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the garden path. This is where prosody is absolutely critical for not looking like an idiot.
But garden path sentence. It's called that because it leads you down the wrong path. It misleads you.
The example in the text is the Roger sentence. I read this 3 times. When Roger leaves, the house is dark.
Just read that again, but flat.
When Roger leaves, the house is dark. See, my brain just wants to hear, when Roger leaves the house, and then stop. And then I'm left with, is dark. And I'm like, wait, what is dark?
Right. You assumed the house was the object of leaves, that Roger is leaving from the house. That's called early closure. Your brain wants to wrap up the phrase as fast as possible.
What the sentence actually means is, when Roger leaves, pause, the house is dark. The house is dark at the time of his leaving.
Exactly. And in text, you'd fix that with a comma. In speech, we fix it with a prosodic break. And scientists map these out with a system called ToBI tone and Break Indices.
ToBI sounds like a character from Lord of the Rings.
It's actually really cool. It's basically sheet music for speech. They score conversation. A break index 1 is like the tiny gap between words. A break index 4 is a full stop, a major boundary.
So we're just walking around performing a musical score we've never even seen.
We are. And the studies show that listeners use these break indices immediately. They don't wait for the sentence to end. If I say, when Roger leaves, and I give you a nice long pause, a break index 4, your brain goes, okay, phrase closed, new phrase is coming. You don't get confused.
So the pause isn't just silence, it's an instruction. It's code.
It's an instruction to the parser in your brain, yeah.
But here's where I get a little skeptical. I get that listeners use it, but do we as speakers really do this on purpose? Because half the time I feel like I'm just rambling. Am I subconsciously calculating break index 4s to help you? Or am I just taking a breath because I'm out of air?
That is the production debate, and it's a big one. Are speakers benevolent? Do we practice audience design? Or are we just, like you said, gasping for air?
I'd like to think I'm benevolent, but the early data in the chapter, it seemed to suggest we're all pretty lazy.
The early studies did show that. They found that unless speakers were explicitly told, hey, this is ambiguous, please clarify, they were just really messy with their prosody. They just kind of mumble through.
That feels right, honestly.
But then researchers realized the lab settings were just too boring. If the stakes are low, why bother clarifying? So they designed a study that actually mattered. They made it a game.
The cooperative board game study. I loved this one.
It's a great setup. You have 2 people. The driver has the map and the slider has the mouse. The driver has to tell the slider where to move pieces. But here's the kicker. There are hazards.
Ravenous goats.
Ravenous goats that eat your cookies if you make a wrong move.
Nothing focuses the mind like the threat of a virtual goat.
Precisely. So the driver has to say things like, I want to change the position of the square with the triangle. Now, on the board, you might have a square piece, a triangle piece, and maybe a square that has a triangle painted on it.
Oh, I see the problem. Move the square with the triangle. Does that mean use the triangle to push the square, or move the specific square that has a triangle on it?
Cure ambiguity. And if the slider guesses wrong, the goat eats the cookie.
So what happened? Did people clarify?
They did. Without being told to, speakers naturally used prosody. They paused. Move the square with the triangle versus move the square with the triangle. They used rhythm to save their partners from the goats.
So when there's a goal, when communication actually matters, we naturally tune up the orchestra.
Exactly. It suggests prosody is functional. We deploy it when we need to. There was another study, Snedeker and Truswell, that took this even further with visual context. The frog and flower study.
Okay, this one needs a little visualization. Paint the picture for us.
So you're the listener. You're looking at a table. On the table, there's a big frog. There's a flower by itself. And then there's a second, smaller frog holding a little flower.
Okay, 2 frogs, one holding a flower and a loose flower. Got it.
And the speaker tells you, tap the frog with the flower.
And I'm frozen. Do I pick up the loose flower and whack the big frog with it? Or do I just tap the little frog who's already holding a flower?
It's the same ambiguity. With the flower can be an instrument or a modifier, a tool or a description.
So what did the speakers do?
When the scene was ambiguous like that, with all the objects, speakers used really clear prosodic breaks to distinguish the meaning. But, and this is a cool part, what if they took away the second frog?
So there's only one frog on the table now.
Only one frog. Now, the instruction tap the frog with the flower can really only mean one thing. You have to use the flower to tap the frog.
Because there isn't another frog to choose from.
Right. And in that case, the speakers got lazy. They didn't bother with the special prosody. They just mumbled it.
That is just ruthless efficiency. It's like our brains are these little energy-saving machines. Don't need my fancy intonation here. The visual context is doing the work for me.
It shows that prosody isn't some fixed rule book. It's a dynamic tool we use to fill in the gaps the environment leaves open.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about pauses, the breaks, the silence. That's the rhythm part. But what about the actual notes? The melody?
Right, pitch and prominence. This is about how we highlight information.
The example that really stuck with me was the simple math sentence. She teaches math.
This is a great one to hear in your own head. If I ask you, what does she do with math? How do you answer?
I'd say, she teaches math. I'm stressing the verb. The pitch goes up on teach.
Okay, and what if I ask, what does she teach?
Then it's, she teaches math.
The words are identical. The syntax is identical. But that pitch accent, that little spike in frequency, tells the listener, this is the new information. Pay attention to this part.
And the Deep Dives material mentions that this isn't just about emphasis, it's about speed. This is the part that felt like science fiction to me. The eye-tracking stuff.
Oh, the Dahan candle and candy study. This shows just how insanely fast the brain is.
So same setup. I'm looking at objects on a screen.
You're looking at a screen. There's a candle and a piece of candy. Now, in English, both of those start with the sound can.
Right.
So if I start saying can, theoretically, you shouldn't know which one I mean until I get to the little or the illity part.
I should have to wait for the whole word to finish.
But you don't. They found that speakers produced candle and candy with slightly different pitch contours right from the start. And listeners, their eyes moved to the correct object before the word was even finished.
Wait, hold on. So if I hear the pitch go up on can, my brain goes, oh, that's the candy melody, and my eyes flick over to the candy before you've even finished the word.
Yes. Prosody lets the brain predict the future. We aren't just processing what's happened. We're using that musical contour to guess what's coming next, milliseconds at a time. It's a predictive mechanism.
That is wild. It explains why listening to an old computer voice like a first-generation GPS used to be so exhausting. It didn't have that predictive pitch. You had to wait for every single word to land.
Exactly. Without prosody, you're stripping away all the predictive cues. You're forcing the brain to work twice as hard.
Which brings us to the final section of the chapter, the global picture. Because real life isn't just she teaches math. It's complicated, messy paragraphs.
Right. And this is where we learn it's not a binary thing. Pause here, don't pause there. It's a hierarchy. The source calls it relative break size.
The Susie and Bill example. This one actually made my head hurt a little.
Okay, let's break it down. The sentence is, Susie learned that Bill telephoned after John visited.
Okay. Susie learned that Bill telephoned after John visited. The question is, when did Bill make the call? Did he telephone after John visited? Or did Susie learn about the call after John visited?
It's a totally valid ambiguity.
Okay.
After John visited could attach to telephoned, or it could attach all the way back to the beginning to learned.
So how on earth does the brain decide?
It compares the pauses. It literally measures the silence after learned and compares it to the silence after telephoned.
It's a contest.
It's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
If the pause after learned is longer than the pause after telephoned, the brain groups the last two parts together. So it hears, Susie learned that Bill telephoned after John visited.
But if you flip it, if you say, Susie learned that Bill telephoned after John visited, with a longer pause in the middle.
Then the listener attaches the end of the sentence to the beginning. The meaning completely flips. And the amazing thing is, it's not about the absolute length of the pause in seconds. It's about the relative length within the same sentence. Your brain is doing a comparative analysis of silence in real time to build a grammatical tree.
That is. It's absurdly complex for something we do while chewing gum.
It really is. It supports this whole theory of a global prosodic representation. We don't just hear word by word. We hear a global shape, a melody, and we fit the words into that shape.
This brings me all the way back to the beginning. The nuisance variable. It just seems like those early researchers had it completely backwards.
Yeah.
Prosody isn't the static on the radio.
It's the signal.
It is the signal.
It's the scaffolding. That's the real takeaway here. Prosody resolves ambiguity. It tells us what's new information. It tells us when a thought ends. And it helps us predict what's coming next. It is the grammar of spoken language.
And yet, and this is where I get a little worried, we're all moving away from it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, just think about how much of our communication is now text. Slack, email, DMs. We're stripping away the relative break sizes. We are deleting all the pitch accent.
You're right. We're communicating in that monotone condition that the 1960s researchers dreamed of.
Exactly. We have voluntarily put ourselves in the nuisance variable condition,
Yeah.
and then we sit around and wonder why everyone's so angry on the internet.
It makes a scary amount of sense. Without prosody to guide us down the right gardening path, we're constantly misinterpreting the structure. We assume sarcasm where there's none. We assume aggression because we can't hear the softness in the pitch.
We're forcing our brains to hallucinate the clicks, but we have no idea if we're putting them in the right place anymore.
We're just guessing, and as the Rogers sentence shows, the brain is happy to guess, but it's often wrong.
So, bringing it all back to that dark highway.
The head in the road.
If we know that babies are born listening for rhythm, and we know that adults will literally hallucinate sounds to fit that rhythm, and we know that we look at candy before the word is even finished because of the rhythm,
Where are you going with this?
I guess I'm wondering if we're losing a sense. If we spend 10 hours a day reading text that has no rhythm, are we damaging that predictive mechanism in our brains? Are we basically driving down the highway with our headlights off?
That's a scary thought. If prosody is the scaffolding of comprehension and we collectively decide to stop using it, maybe the whole building starts to wobble.
It makes me want to pick up the phone instead of sending another text.
Or at least use your commas with extreme prejudice.
What's that ahead in the road? Versus what's that ahead? Punctuation saves lives, people, but it turns out prosody saves them faster.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you in the next one.